After being reborn, the first thing my cousin and I did was swap husbands. In my previous life, my cousin and I married at the same time. Gentle and composed, she married the aloof naval commander Julian. Because Julian stayed to celebrate his childhood friend's birthday and missed his anniversary with my cousin, she asked him for an explanation. Julian insisted he had a clear conscience, and the two of them then spent 50 years in a Cold War. As for me, who would rather act than whine with my hot-headed streak, I was married to the quick-tempered bookkeeper of the mechanical factory compound. Accounting was quiet and bookish, always complaining about my loud voice, not knowing how to dress. He and I quarreled over little things every 3 days, had big fights every 5, until finally he left home and didn't come back. We were married less than a year when we divorced. When I opened my eyes again, my cousin and I were back on the day we married the same man. "You foolish girl, get down here right now. You have a perfectly good accountant in the city and you refuse to marry him, you want to go to that godforsaken island. How did I end up giving birth to such a troublesome child?" Watching my mother run after the train, shouting and chiding me as if I were hopeless, a sourness rose in my chest. But thinking of how my cousin and I ended in my previous life, I kept telling myself my decision was right. Cheong Island is desolate, and Julian is difficult to get along with, but so what? If we can make it work, fine, if not, then we'll part ways. I'm a grown woman, can't I live without a man? But my cousin wasn't acceptable. In my last life, after she married Julian, the two of them spent a lifetime misunderstanding because of the person who stood between them. Someone who was genuinely gentle was squandered by Julian like that. So this time, having been reborn and seeing my cousin with her brow furrowed and a face full of worry, I decisively began packing my things. "Sis, I'll marry Julian. Quinn may not seem like much, but he's got a good temper, you two should be able to make a go of it together." At my words, my cousin sprang up with joy on her face, but then bit her lip and said firmly, "Vera, Julian is not easy to get along with, and don't even mention that childhood friend of his. I can't make you bear my misfortune. Sis, if this engagement is one you can't get out of, then marrying anyone is the same. Grandpa never said which granddaughter had to go. Besides, Julian isn't easy to get along with, what's wrong with your sister? When I get to Cheong Island, if I can make a life there I will, if I can't, I'll fight. If there's a grudge, I'll settle it, if there's hatred, I'll repay it. Screw the consequences, what matters is being satisfied." Saying that, I put on an impromptu display of martial moves. Watching me goof around, my cousin went from crying to laughing and tapped my forehead. "You." Unlike my cousin's gentleness, I'd practiced martial arts since childhood and was used to acting rather than wasting words. So I and that self-styled scholar Quinn always clashed, too many words for too little meaning. I despised his constant name-dropping of books, and he despised that I didn't behave like a proper woman. Life with my cousin wasn't much better. In less than a year the two of them had gone their separate ways. So this time it would be better to let my cousin marry him. Even if things went wrong, at least Quinn lived nearby. Having family close was surely better than my cousin having spent the last life alone on Cheong Island, wronged with nowhere to turn, eventually sinking into illness from depression. As I thought this, I kept tugging at my cousin's hand and acting coy until, helpless, she finally nodded. "Fine, I'll switch with you." So, holding my luggage, I boarded the train bound for Cheong Island. What I hadn't expected was that my mother would arrive so quickly. I had even left a letter, spelling everything out clearly and plainly. What was there left to worry about? I'm going to Cheong Island to get married. If I can't make it, I'll come back myself, I shouted to my mother as she chased the train. Just like that, eating and sleeping, the 3-day, 2-night train ride quickly reached Province A. I nimbly grabbed my things and squeezed onto the ship bound for Cheong Island again, thinking this trip would be another easy sleep-and-arrive affair, but I hadn't expected that seasickness still existed in this world. By the time the crossing was over, my face was ashen and my body gave off a strange smell. Sitting in the military guard post waiting for Julian to come out and fetch me, I couldn't help thinking about how I'd just thrown up everything, and felt a bit relieved. After all, I'm the one getting married this time, how could delicate cousin endure such suffering? Julian, this room has a weird smell, I feel so sick. As I sank into thought, a cloying voice sounded in front of me. I looked up. A girl with braided pigtails, who looked delicate as a willow, was covering her nose and complaining to the man beside her. I glanced at the tall, straight-backed man standing beside her with a stern face and rolled my eyes. Julian, right? I'm your fiancé, Vera. Check the marriage certificate, if everything's in order, find me somewhere to rest right away. Saying that, I tossed my luggage toward him, ignored the woman's aggrieved expression, stood up, and started to walk out. Julian, does sister-in-law not like me? Behind me, Jolie said plaintively. Already exhausted from the journey and dizzy, an inexplicable anger flared up in me, like or not like, do we even know each other? Julian, can you be a man and do things a bit faster? Having said that, I didn't look at their faces, wearing a sullen expression as I started to walk out. After a few steps I felt someone following. A sidelong glance revealed it was Julian, carrying his luggage with nothing readable on his face. He also showed no sign of wanting to explain what had just happened. No wonder my cousin in her previous life lived with a constant sense of grievance, just because of that little white lotus and that gossipy, sharp-tongued troublemaker. My cousin was proud and aloof. If they were thrown together, she couldn't help but come off worse. Too bad, I'm not the patient sort. If life's good, fine, if it's not, I make sure you all feel miserable with me. Because the childhood engagement was a real thing, Julian had already received the call from his family and knew I would arrive. Early on he filed the marriage paperwork. So, within a couple of days, with the help of the army wives, our wedding was arranged. The Jean family's parents had died young, my own family was even more remote and distant, so the guests were mostly Julian's comrades and the army wives. Still, the atmosphere was lively, and the housing compound buzzed with celebration. I really envy Vera, she can marry Julian because of an arranged childhood engagement. What a lucky life. Not like me. She trailed off, lowering her head and sobbing quietly. The courtyard, which had been bustling with the wedding festivities, fell instantly to the sound of her weeping, and the guests gathered for the banquet exchanged awkward looks. Watching Jolie cover her face, her back trembling, I curled my lips and stepped forward 2 paces, rising onto my toes to cup Julian's face. Then, smack, I planted a kiss on him. I shot Jolie an arrogant look and raised an eyebrow. See? I'm not lucky by accident. Your Julian has career, he has looks, he has a body. Only someone as fortunate as me could marry him. Otherwise, I worry someone with less luck wouldn't be able to handle so much blessing. With that, the hand gripping Julian's waist tightened and gave a vicious little twist. Then I turned to him with a threatening smile. Isn't that right, Julian? The man's face betrayed no expression, but the roots of his ears flushed inexplicably. Before Julian could speak, Jolie looked at him pitifully, her eyes still rimmed with red. Julian, sister-in-law, please don't misunderstand. I'm sincerely here to wish you both well. If sister-in-law doesn't like me, I won't attend the wedding today, but... As she spoke, 2 clear tears slid down Jolie's cheeks. Julian, remember to come pick me up tomorrow. For so many years we've always spent this day together. Julian nodded. I'll have things ready to come get you tomorrow, don't worry. When I heard that, the hand that had been around Julian's waist moved on its own and I gave him an over-the-shoulder throw. The courtyard fell silent, everyone looked at me in disbelief. As if I'd let them get away with that at a wedding. What kind of damned anniversary is this? In their past life they must have been all lovey-dovey and left without so much as an explanation to my sister. Because of that they spent a lifetime respecting each other like ice. I'm not my sister, she could tolerate it, but I won't. You want to celebrate an anniversary? If he dares, I'll fight him, then grab my bag and get the hell off this desolate island. If it weren't for the elders insisting on keeping their promise, and if our Wang family's daughter weren't considered hard to marry off, I don't know how comfortable my life as aunt would have been. Julian, does it hurt? Sister-in-law, how can you do this? Julian's a grown man, and you just... Jolie's fair little face was flushed with anger, and the way she looked at Julian was full of heartbreak. Julian, however, straightened up quickly, gave me a meaningful once-over, then pressed his fist to his mouth and coughed twice. "I'm fine." Then, as if nothing had happened, he came over and took my hand. "Tomorrow you come with me." Hearing this, I glanced at Julian in surprise. Jolie looked even more incredulous. "Julian, how could you do this? I never want to see you again." Saying that, she covered her face and ran out crying. At that moment, a warm whisper reached my ear. "Finish the ceremony first, I'll explain everything in a bit, be good." With nothing, or no one, to get in the way, and me still out of sorts, the guests dared not make a scene, so the rest of the wedding moved along swiftly. Before long, sitting in the bridal chamber, I slapped the bed hard. "Julian, what did he mean by that? Was he just using the beauty trick? Don't think that will work on me." With a click. Seeing Julian push the door open, I quickly put on a cold face and snorted. "I'll tell you, the thing I hate most is men who can't make up their minds. If one day you have a sister and the next day an old flame, then we'd better call it quits now and not hold up my return home to get married." Hearing me, Julian frowned. "You were promised to me by my grandfather. If I marry you, I'll be responsible for you." I snorted when I heard that. "Julian, what era do you think this is? I'm telling you, if it works, it works, if it doesn't, then we split. Besides, when they arranged the marriage back then, no one said that marrying me meant I'd belong to you for life. You." Julian paced back and forth in the room as if I had enraged him. Then he sighed and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to take my hand. "Dara, there was nothing between Jolie and me before, and there won't be anything after. I genuinely want to live a good life with you." As he spoke, he ignored my struggling and gripped my hand tightly. "I'm not good with words. If you're unhappy about anything, tell me directly. If it's something I can change, I will." Under the light in the bridal room, the man looked utterly earnest. Seeing him like that, I felt an inexplicable warmth rise to my face. I nodded and, pretending not to care, said, "All right, my temper isn't great either. As long as you can accept that." After speaking, I couldn't help but feel a little irritated at the glint of amusement that flashed in Julian's eyes. I stepped forward, wrapped my arm around his neck, and kissed him. Soon, their breathing grew increasingly rapid. Julian truly lived up to his reputation as a battle-hardened man. Before long he turned the tables, placing his hand on my button, and without blinking stared at me, his voice hoarse as he said, "May I?" "Wife." I, embarrassed and annoyed, pinched him. What was there to ask at a moment like this? Seeing my flushed face, Julian chuckled softly and buried his face in the hollow of my neck. "It was my fault." Feeling the warmth at my neck, I slowly closed my eyes. "Julian, something's wrong." Jolie left a note and then disappeared. There was a loud banging at the door. Julian froze, then straightened up quickly. "Darling, you stay and sleep. I'm going out." Hearing that, I glared at Julian in fury. "There are so many people in the unit, does it have to be you who goes? Don't you know tonight is our wedding night?" Julian finished dressing, came over to me, took my clothes and was about to help me put them on. "I'll go with you, my love. The He family saved my life. I can't just ignore their only daughter, so why don't you come with me? When we get back you can scold me or hit me if you want." I was stunned for a moment when I heard that, then shoved him away and finished dressing myself. "Let's go." Without looking at Julian, I walked out with a cold face. After only a few steps I felt a warmth on my hand. I tried to shake it off but couldn't, and I shot Julian an annoyed look. "Honey, walk slower, it's dark at night." Ignoring my anger, Julian held my hand tight and, after only a few steps, we arrived at the He residence. Because the elder members of the He family had passed away early, the military still took good care of Jolie, the orphan child, and she lived alone in a large courtyard. The place was crowded with people. Lena, the military wife who had first noticed Jolie was missing, anxiously stepped forward holding a letter. "Julian, I don't want to be a burden to everyone. I'm going to be with my parents. Looking at the short letter in his hand, Julian's brow furrowed. He quickly ordered everyone to spread out and search. Soon, shouts of Jolie rang out all over the island, especially along the coastline where the crowds were thickest. Afraid that something really had happened, I also wandered around this unfamiliar island looking for people. But thinking of the coastal area with so many people, I began to search every nook and cranny. Unexpectedly, I made an accidental discovery. "Why is it you who came? Where's Julian?" Hearing my footsteps, Jolie turned around in surprise, but the moment she saw who had come, her face instantly fell. Seeing her standing on the rocks with that look of resentment, I sneered. "What, a man whose heart never belonged to you is worth you risking everything?" At this, Jolie's face flushed red then paled, and she bit her lip before speaking. "What do you know? Julian and I grew up together. My family even saved his life. If you hadn't shoved yourself in, his wife would have been me." Hearing that, I snorted coldly. "Ha! Would a man who's already in love with you give me any chance to interfere? Besides, we were betrothed before we were born. By any measure of who came first, it isn't you. So, you had nothing to do with him before, and you won't have anything to do with him ever again. Julian will be mine. But if this man so much as thinks about someone else, I wouldn't mind breaking his legs and handing him to you, so the two of you can be a pair of wild mandarin ducks. I just don't know if you could handle it." With that, I turned to leave. She's been found. She clearly had no intention of dying, just the usual crying and causing a scene act of a spoiled girl. I couldn't be bothered to play along. I didn't expect Jolie to grab me, and in my ear she whispered, "Tell me, if we both fell into the sea at the same time, would Julian save you or save me?" She finished speaking, and before I could react I felt a strong force pull me into the water. Unprepared, I swallowed several big mouthfuls of briny, bitter seawater. "Help, Julian, save me." Treading water, I watched Julian rushing over and Jolie putting on a show of panic. A flare of anger hit my chest. Men who flirt for attention are really infuriating. Then I turned and kicked hard, swimming toward Jolie. What choice between two options? Do I look like someone waiting for a man to rescue her? Not only will I not, you shouldn't either. She seemed surprised that I could swim. Jolie's face was full of disbelief, and when I caught her with my hand she kept struggling violently. She kept shouting, "Julian, save Vera." Seeing her as stubborn to handle as a pig at New Year and Julian already preparing to get into the water, I delivered a chopping blow with my hand that knocked her out, then without ceremony dragged her and swam for the shore. Luckily she had only just fallen in and the shore wasn't far. It took only a moment before we were there. Julian wanted to come help, but I snapped at him without hesitation, "Get away. If you touch her once today, tomorrow you can go to her house to ask for her hand." After saying that, I collapsed to the ground, breathing hard, watching a crowd gather around Jolie. Julian glanced darkly at Jolie lying on the ground, then took off his coat and draped it over me. "Honey, let's go home." At those words, the woman who had been lying on the ground and revived by the medics suddenly sat up and shouted, "Julian, you can't leave." Seeing everyone's suspicious, appraising gazes, Jolie pouted, tears welling in her eyes. "Julian, Vera pushed me into the sea. Are you going to help a murderer?" Her words caused an uproar. One of the more hot-headed sisters-in-law stormed up to me and, pointing at my nose, shouted, "Fine, I thought you were straightforward, but you're really black-hearted. How could our Jolie endure you? How could you do something so rotten? Isn't that right? Girls from out of town just aren't any good." Accusations kept coming from all around. I clenched my fists and looked at the crowd before me, and at Jolie, who had a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Anger robbed me of reason. All I could think about was stepping forward to give Jolie a couple of hits. But Julian grabbed me with one hand. Seeing the dark look on his face made me even angrier. Does he think anyone would choose to come to this damned island, eat poorly, sleep poorly, and now be falsely accused? Even this man doesn't believe me. Thinking that made me inexplicably uneasy. Of course, he still chose to believe his little childhood friend. Fine, I'll beat them all up, then go get a divorce. Vera wouldn't do something like that, I believe her. And Jolie, have you forgotten you were last year's swimming champion? The moment those words left her mouth, Jolie's face went deathly pale. Yeah, Jolie, don't you know how to swim? Why did you need someone to save you just now? Facing the crowd's skeptical looks, Jolie really panicked this time, tears streaked down her cheeks. I suddenly fell into the sea just now and got frightened, so my leg cramped up. If Vera hadn't pulled me, I wouldn't have been so scared. Seeing her still stubbornly insisting I had pushed her, I couldn't hold back my anger any longer. I forcefully shook Julian off and marched up to Jolie, slapping her hard across the face twice. Immediately, Jolie's cheek visibly swelled. You actually hit me, who do you think you are to hit me? The sting on her face sent Jolie over the edge. She lunged at me, trying to claw me. I kicked her and sent her sprawling to the ground. I clapped my hands, looking down at Jolie sitting on the floor holding her face, and sneered, I hit you, so what? Since when does it need a special occasion? Julian, you promised my parents you'd take care of me. Are you just going to stand by and watch your wife bully me? If you hadn't arrived when you did, I wouldn't even be alive today. Jolie's eyes were bloodshot. She looked at Julian with an expression of wounded grievance. The others cast disapproving glances at me. You have a point. Julian glanced at Jolie, then nodded. Seeing him like that, I inwardly cursed myself for being blind to marry such a thing. I was about to make a scene and go down with him when he stepped forward and gripped my hand so tightly I couldn't break free. Then let the detectives investigate. Based on what just happened and the traces at the scene, it won't be hard to figure out. If Vera did it, I won't cover for her, but if my wife is being framed, I won't stand by and let it happen. At those words, the onlookers nodded repeatedly, and some busybodies immediately turned to fetch the investigators. Jolie stood in the middle, pale and trembling. The other army wives, seeing she'd been soaked in seawater and chilled, immediately took off their coats and wrapped her tightly, crowding around her. I sniffed, lowered my head, and thought to myself, why hasn't anyone come yet? Hurry up and say it was me, then I can divorce this man and go home to eat my mother's braised pork. This godforsaken place, stay here if you like. As for the man who flirts with every woman, whoever wants him can have him. Wife, I believe you. Hold on a little longer, once your name is cleared, we'll go home. You can beat me, scold me, do whatever you want. Feeling the warmth at my ear, I froze for a moment and looked up at Julian. The man's eyes were full of guilt, and his expression was unusually cautious. Soon, the investigation arrived, but things didn't go the way I had expected, that our own would cover for one of their own. Once the investigators concluded that Jolie had jumped on her own, the army wives in the compound came over with awkward expressions to apologize to me. There were even well-intentioned ones who, seeing Jolie sitting on the ground with her head bowed in silence, tried to explain on her behalf, asking me to be more tolerant of her. After all, she was young and had lost her parents, which wasn't easy. Everyone wants to pardon her, who will show mercy to my wife? A young girl traveled all the way to our island and ended up being framed. Who am I supposed to go to for justice? Jolie, listen clearly, your life is yours. Your uncle and his wife are heroes, and their daughter should live with dignity. From now on I won't meddle in your affairs, look after yourself. Saying that, regardless of the expressions around them and no matter how Jolie behind them held an unwillingness, Julian took my hand and turned away. Back at the staff housing compound, Julian brought over freshly made ginger broth and then carefully sat down beside me. Wife, when we were on that mission, it was Jolie's father who covered our withdrawal. He stayed behind because of that. So over the years we've been more lenient with Jolie. After all, she's his only blood, but we didn't expect our indulgence would seem to have spoiled the child. Saying that, Julian sighed. The man who had been so tough a moment ago now looked inexplicably bewildered. What are you sighing about? I'm telling you, from now on I don't care about any Jolie or anything, and I don't care whether she has done you favors or holds a grudge against you. If you so much as get entangled with another woman, I'll break all 3 of your legs and gift wrap them to her. Seeing me scowl and raise my fist threateningly, Julian laughed out loud and then took my hand in his fist. Alright, whatever my wife says goes. The night is short, let's not argue about this. Get some rest early. Saying that, she set the empty bowl from my hands aside and gripped my waist tightly with her burning hands. Soon, my consciousness began to blur, and I sank into a haze. In the days that followed, Jolie did not appear before me. Instead, those army wives who had come before would now and then bring the vegetables they grew to my door, or, when the tide receded, invite me to go beachcombing with them for seafood. Life went on at an unhurried pace like that, and I seemed to slowly fall in love with island life. My relationship with Julian grew increasingly steady. Even though everything was clearly improving, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I felt an inexplicable unease in my heart. Until that day, I was happily carrying a bag of freshly picked oysters back home when I saw Julian pacing anxiously at the gate, his brow furrowed, something clutched in his hand, looking very worried. When he saw me, he immediately grabbed me. Oh my, gone for just a moment and already so frantic for his wife? Lucky Vera, really lucky. Seeing him unlike his usual self, and after dodging a few teasing remarks from the other military wives, I hurried him back inside. Before I could speak, Julian took out what he'd been holding and handed it to me. Honey, after we got married did we forget to call home? This looks like a letter from Mom and Dad. At those words my hand slipped, the big oyster I'd been savoring fell to the floor and I couldn't be bothered to pick it up. Because I knew my fate would probably be worse than that oyster's. I unsteadily opened the letter in my hand, and sure enough, Cousin Jolie's polite handwriting couldn't hide my mother's murderous tone. Accused of inexplicably switching partners with my sister, charge 1. Audaciously running off and marrying someone on my own, charge 2. Marrying and then abandoning the family, never contacting them, an offense piled atop offenses, the kind with no way out. Seeing Julian's ugly expression at the end, for some reason I felt relieved. Whatever, let the sky fall and let him catch it. I don't know anything, nothing at all. All I know is that life is comfortable now. At the end of the letter my sister wrote that after marrying Quinn their days are full and flavorful, and what's more, before long I'll be welcoming my own little nephew. You have to understand, in the last life my cousin spent her whole life with Julian and they never had children. I divorced early and went off to build a career, and I too died alone. This life has finally taken a different path. Wife, your sister already has a child, when are we going to have one? Julian had come up behind me at some point, slipping his arm around my waist and whispering in my ear. Forcing myself to ignore the warmth at my ear, I blurted out breezily, isn't this supposed to be about you? If you were any good I'd already be pregnant. Hearing that, Julian didn't get angry, instead he glanced at the oysters beside us, his voice low as he chuckled, good. Tonight I'll make up for it properly, I'll make sure you catch up. How that night went I'll leave unsaid, but for a long time after I didn't dare bring oysters home. Even if I found some while foraging at the shore, I'd give them to the other sisters-in-law. After a round of teasing, the military wife next door, Lena, suddenly changed tack and said, hey, guess who I saw yesterday? Seeing everyone's puzzled looks, Lena smiled with satisfaction and continued, last night I went out to look for my boy and just happened to see Jolie and Steve walking hand in hand over by the coconut grove. At this, military wife Wendy hurriedly shook her head, impossible. Steve already has a wife and kids. No matter how wild Jolie is, she wouldn't get involved with a married man, let alone someone old enough to be her father. Meeting the other skeptical gazes, Lena slapped her thigh in defiance and said, ha, I told you and you didn't believe me. Just wait and see, I bet those two won't be able to resist each other for long after what I saw. The island wasn't big, and especially not the part where the troops were stationed. The two of them probably hadn't intended to avoid people. Soon enough, a few rumors began to spread across the island. But neither Julian nor I were the sort to cause trouble, we were both occupied. He was tied up all day with troop training and duties, I didn't want to sit around doing nothing either. After discussing it with Julian, we secured a proposal to collaborate with the military. We planned to set up a food processing plant on the island, using the island's coconuts and various seafood as raw materials. That way we could not only provide the troops with an additional source of revenue, but also give the local islanders some extra income. I didn't expect to run into trouble right at the start. I had been brimming with confidence and ready to make a big push, but who would have thought a single typhoon could almost reduce all my hard work to ashes? Seeing the factory before me strewn and battered by the wind, I rolled up my sleeves and was ready to get to work with the laborers. It's just an accident, isn't it? After so many years riding the waves of the business world, I've seen it all. I never lack the courage to start over. Oh, isn't this Sister Vera? What happened? Did you lose everything? Just as I was working with all my might, a sarcastic voice sounded from behind. I turned around, and sure enough, it was Jolie. Unlike the last few times we met, Jolie had dropped her previously plain look. She wore the season's most fashionable dress, little leather shoes on her feet, and her jewelry and watch were all perfectly matched. But right now the typhoon had just passed and the whole island was a mess. Dressed like that, she must have suffered quite a bit getting here. Catching my scrutinizing gaze, Jolie grew even more smug. Do you know what a good life is? I used to be clueless, thought that big-headed soldier Julian was dependable. Now I understand, a man needs power and money, only then can a woman's life be comfortable. As she spoke, she actually spun around once right in front of me. Otherwise, you'll end up like you are now, married and still running around like this, never getting to enjoy any of the good things. Seeing her smug expression, I sneered and shoved her to the ground. What? Those 2 slaps last time didn't teach you a lesson, or do my fists not look hard enough? If you need a man to live, that's your business, don't come making a fool of yourself in front of me. Great men have said that women hold up half the sky, but only a useless parasite like you would think to cling to someone else to get by. If I were you, after doing something shameful I'd want to hide my head and be too embarrassed to face people. But you're thick-skinned enough to come out and gloat. I bet your face would make a great windbreaker in the next typhoon. A barrage of blunt words left Jolie's face flushing green then red. You dare bully me? I'll tell you, my Steve won't let you off. Don't think you'll get this lousy factory running. Julian, you might as well pack up and scram. Is that so? Today I'm going to see just how you plan to keep this factory from operating. Before I could make a move to give her a couple of slaps, a commanding voice rang out from behind me. Commander. Jolie's lips trembled as she spoke. When she turned, it was Commander Luther, his face stern, looking down at Jolie on the ground with grave seriousness. Standing beside him were Julian and Steve. Ignoring Jolie's current disheveled state, Commander Luther scolded her mercilessly. The factory on the island is for the troops, for our people here. What right do you, Jolie, have to stop it from being built? And what kind of relationship do you have with Steve, a perfectly decent young woman like you? Saying this, he glared sternly at Steve. Commander, we have no relationship. I don't know why this girl is using my name to cause trouble out there. Jolie stared at Steve, incredulous that he would wash his hands of her like that. Steve, how can you be so heartless? I'm yours, how can you say we're not involved? The moment those words came out, Steve instantly broke into a cold sweat, his face flustered as he stepped forward and grabbed Jolie's arm. From where I was, I could see plainly that Steve's eyes were full of accusation. Young lady, you can mess around with your food but you can't go around saying things recklessly. You can't try to drag me down just because you want to help Julian. I have a wife and kids, if you stick me to this, what about your reputation? At that, Jolie's eyes shifted, she turned and looked at Commander Luther and Julian with tears welling up. Julian, I'm sorry. I did all this because I was jealous that Vera could marry you. Just now, when she shoved me to the ground saying we had so many wonderful memories, I lost control of my words. You know you've always been the one in my heart, please don't be angry, okay? After speaking, she lowered her head and covered her face, looking very aggrieved. Hearing this, the onlookers' gazes toward Julian were full of condemnation, and even Commander Luther's eyes flicked back and forth between the two. Steve, seeing the situation turn in his favor, was in a good mood and prepared to help Jolie up from the ground. that's better. This is a matter for you young people, I don't want to get involved. He laughed as he reached down to lift Jolie. But whether Jolie's legs went weak or what, she collapsed to the ground again. Unluckily, there happened to be a large stone there this time. A muffled groan was heard, and Jolie's face instantly went deathly pale. Blood, there's blood. A soldier's wife cried out in alarm. Everyone's eyes followed her pointing finger. Beneath Jolie, it was a spreading pool of bright red. It's a miscarriage, isn't it? In the quiet outdoors, a military wife's mutter carried into the ears of everyone present. Jolie, hearing it, panicked instantly, clutching Steve's arm and, voice breaking, pleaded, "Steve, save our child, save me." At her words, Steve's face went ashen. He knew that nothing he said now would be believed, his relationship with Jolie was already a done deal. "What are you waiting for? Get her to the clinic, now," Commander Luther barked. Gritting his teeth, Steve scooped up the still sobbing Jolie and ran for the clinic. Later, I heard that the child still couldn't be saved. Jolie made another scene at the clinic. Steve, who was supposed to be punished over the affair, had unexpectedly not registered the marriage with the woman back home, so they slipped through a loophole and became the island's couple with the largest age difference. Although the law couldn't punish them, Steve was still affected by the incident. He lost a promotion and was assigned to an unpopular department. If nothing changed, after a few years he'd likely be transferred out and sent back home. Also, even though the first wife hadn't registered the marriage, she hadn't stopped having children. The 3 kids from Steve's hometown heard that their father had remarried, quit school, and showed up at the base carrying their bags. From then on, the Lee household could truly be said to live a life of chaos and commotion. Every day when the army wives exchanged neighborhood gossip, they never failed to mention the riotous happenings in our home. But none of that had anything to do with us anymore, because the factory was finished and everything was back on track. Julian and I finally had time to return to my hometown and beg for forgiveness. The trip home went surprisingly smoothly. I slept comfortably all the way back. We stood at the gate for a long moment. Julian couldn't hold back any longer. Smiling, he took my hand and said, "Don't worry, if they're going to beat or scold you later, I'll stand in front of you. Can we stop shivering at the gate now?" After several deep breaths, I finally mustered the courage to step through the front door. Before I could force a smile, a sharp reprimand came from inside the room, "Kneel." I curled my lip, thinking what was meant to happen had happened, and began to bend toward the floor to kneel. But Julian beat me to it and dropped to his knees first. Looking sincerely at my parents and grandfather seated in the main room, he said, "It's my fault. I should have come back earlier to explain and apologize to you. Beat me, scold me, I won't argue. Only, Vera is frail, I'll take her share as well." Having spoken, he didn't wait for an answer and knocked his head on the floor 3 times with loud thuds. Grandpa still wore that stern expression, unreadable, but my mother's face was all creased up from smiling. If she hadn't been mindful of Grandpa sitting right there, she probably would have gone over already to steady her son-in-law into his seat. "Grandpa, don't be upset, don't be upset. My little niece is here, do me a favor, show some face. Besides, look how happy your 2 daughters are now." Having said that, she didn't wait for the old man to respond. She hurried to the door and snatched the little niece from my cousin's arms. Not paying careful attention, she used a bit too much force and made my cousin stagger. Before I could reach out, Quinn dropped what he was holding and hastily wrapped his arms around her. "You're an adult and still so clumsy with your hands, you really aren't anything like your sister. A woman should be gentle and dignified," Quinn said solemnly. My cousin patted Quinn's hand soothingly. I couldn't help rolling my eyes. Through gritted teeth I said, "Got it, brother-in-law. Vera has a good temperament. I like that she's so lively." At some point Julian had come up behind me and was teasing Quinn with a smile. "All right, you lot standing in the doorway like doormen, hurry up and take your seats to eat." Hearing the old man speak, my cousin and I exchanged a smile. Sure enough, tough on the outside, soft on the inside, smooth sailing. At the table, Quinn cradled the child with his left arm while his right hand kept serving his sister. This is your favorite, eat more. Auntie's cooking is the best. Next time when I have time off I'll have to learn a few tricks from her. It's rare to see you with such an appetite. Watching Quinn care for my cousin while constantly muttering to herself, I couldn't help but widen my eyes. Is this still the man who believed a gentleman stays away from the kitchen? In my past life we argued a lot about this, and now he volunteers as soon as it comes to my cousin? Honey, I've learned how to make everything you like to eat, so could you stop staring at other people like that? Ahem. Hearing the faintly jealous tone in Julian's voice, I cleared my throat awkwardly twice. Indeed, life has been rather good to me. It seems Cupid's red string was spot on this time. We've both found the right person. After dinner, seeing Quinn glued to my cousin's side, I couldn't resist shooing him away. After some fussing, I finally managed to get a little alone time with my cousin. Sis, wanna come with me to Hainan? No sooner had the words left her mouth than her sister's eyes widened in bewilderment. You see, we all know the commune is about to be dismantled, and my brother-in-law will probably be laid off. I happen to have set up a little factory over there. It's doing really well now and needs trustworthy people to help out. Most importantly, you were ruined by that Jolie so badly in your last life. This time you have to go see with your own eyes how miserable and wretched her life really is. I don't know which of those lines convinced my cousin, nor how she managed to persuade Quinn. Anyway, on the return trip I walked happily ahead arm in arm with my cousin, feeling thoroughly pleased with myself, leaving those two stinky men behind carrying the baby and the luggage. She kept her good mood all the way, and it reached its peak as she passed the Lee family's house. My dad said it, you're here to serve us. Whatever we make you do, you have to do. If a woman won't listen, give her 2 beatings and that'll do. At that moment Jolie was being shoved by 3 half-grown boys. All her former haughtiness was gone. She looked so frail it seemed a gust of wind would knock her over, her body covered in bruises, her face numb and expressionless like a puppet. Second brother, you can't talk like that. You're family now, you've got to get along. Yeah, Steve, you just stand there and watch a few kids bully Vera like that. After all, she's a newly married wife. After all, these were kids they'd watched grow up in the yard. Seeing them fall to this was too much, and the other army wives couldn't help but speak up for her. Steve only sat to the side, puffing on his cigarette, his face dark and completely unresponsive, watching his new wife being shoved to the ground and beaten and shouted at by his sons. Bah, what family? She's just a tramp who ruined our household. It's a mercy we didn't make her sleep in the cowshed. I don't know what kind of parents could give birth to a slut like you. If the top beam isn't straight, the lower beam will be crooked, your whole family's worthless. Perhaps some phrase struck Jolie's nerve. Before anyone could react, Jolie suddenly sprang up, slammed the child who had just spoken to the ground, and pummeled him. She looked frail, but her face had gone feral, like a demon from hell, chilling everyone to the bone. The scene descended into chaos. Steve, watching his son being beaten, went after Jolie without mercy. The military wives couldn't stand to see Jolie hit, so they pulled people apart and fought back. The whole courtyard was uproarious. Later, because the incident caused such a scandal, Steve was immediately arranged to be discharged. He wasn't even given a chance to transfer into civilian work. He took his sons back to their hometown to rejoin his original wife and farm. As for Jolie, she took the opportunity to divorce Steve and then disappeared from the island. From that moment on, there wasn't a trace of her left on the place where she had been born and raised. No one knew where she had gone, and no one knew how she was getting by. But my cousin and I didn't want to bother worrying about any of that anymore. The factory was doing so well that we were kept constantly busy, with no time to spare for caring about people and things that didn't matter. Because he'd been working overtime for several straight days and collapsed into sleep as soon as he got home, Julian finally couldn't hold back his emotions. I'll have to figure out how to soothe him when I get back later, sigh.